TAA last resort. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Confederation fell silent as Supreme Director Vrax entered. His normally vibrant scales had dulled to a sickly gray, matching the mood that permeated the room. The greatest minds of 17 different species watched as he slowly made his way to the central podium, his movements betraying the exhaustion that had become their collective burden. The Keldari system has fallen, Vrax announced, his voice wavering. The void horde consumed it in less than a standard day. No gasps, no cries of shock, just the heavy weight of despair. The void horde had appeared 6 months ago, emerging from an unknown region of space. They weren't invaders in any traditional sense. They were consumers. Entire planets reduced to barren husks, their resources, their people, their very essence absorbed into the collective mass that observers had named the Void Horde. "That makes 26 systems lost," said General Tholian, her crystalline form reflecting the dim emergency lighting that had become standard across Confederation space. "Our projections indicate that we have perhaps 40 days before they reach the core worlds." "What of the resonance barrier?" asked Counselor Zeph, one of the few representatives remaining from the outer systems. Vrax gestured to Chief Science Officer Mira, who stepped forward. The Lyrian's tentacles moved in patterns betraying her nervousness. "The barrier's effectiveness decreased by 63% during the last encounter," she said. "The Void Horde adapts, impossibly fast. Each defense we create becomes obsolete within hours." "Then we are doomed," said Zeph, slumping in his gravity chair. The silence returned, heavier than before. 17 species, countless trillions of lives, all facing extinction with no hope of salvation. Then a voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber, soft yet commanding attention. "There is one option we haven't considered." All eyes turned to Elder Ketra, the ancient historian whose age was measured in millennia rather than standard years. The archivist rarely attended war councils, preferring the quiet of the great repository. "Speak, Elder," said Vrax, desperation tinging his voice. Ketra hobbled forward, a data crystal clutched in one of his 4 hands. "I have been searching the deepest archives, records sealed for over 700 years. Records from before the unification." He slotted the crystal into the central console. The holographic display flickered to life, showing star charts of a region at the edge of the galaxy, designated as Quarantine Zone X937. "The humans," he said simply. A collective shudder ran through the chamber. Even after centuries, that name carried weight. "That's not an option," General Tholian said sharply. "The quarantine exists for a reason." "The quarantine exists because we feared them," Ketra countered. "Because they were unpredictable, because they wouldn't conform to our harmonious ways." "They were savages," hissed Counselor Zeph. "Do you not remember the histories? Their own planet scarred by countless wars, their expansion driven by conflict rather than cooperation." "I remember," Ketra said, his ancient eyes gleaming. "I was there when the decision was made. I was among those who voted for quarantine. But now I ask you, what's more frightening, the humans or extinction?" The chamber erupted into chaos, arguments flying back and forth. Supreme Director Vrax raised his hand, bringing silence once more. "What exactly are you suggesting, Elder?" he asked. "We need warriors," Ketra said simply. "For all our technological advancement, the Confederation has known peace for so long that we've forgotten how to fight. But the humans, they never forgot." "You think they would help us?" Mira asked, incredulous. "After we isolated them, blocked their expansion, left them confined to a single star system." "I don't know," admitted Ketra. "But I know this. Humans are survivors, and they are unlike any species we've encountered. Where we see patterns, they see possibilities. Where we plan, they improvise. Where we yield, they fight." Vrax stared at the holographic display, at the tiny system that housed a species the Confederation had judged too dangerous to incorporate. "And if they refuse to help?" he asked. Then we face extinction, having tried everything, Kettera said. But if they agree. He left the thought unfinished. The debate lasted for hours, but in the end, faced with no alternatives, the decision was made. A mission would be sent to the human quarantine zone. A single ship carrying Ambassador Celine Vaxter, whose species' empathic abilities might help bridge the centuries of isolation. As the council adjourned, Elder Kettera approached Celine privately. "There's something you should know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something not included in the official records." Celine's 4 eyes focused on the ancient historian. "What is it?" "The quarantine was never just to protect us from them," he said. "It was also to protect them from us, from our influence, our desire to change them." "Why tell me this now?" she asked. "Because when you meet them," he said, "remember this, respect their difference. It may be the very thing that saves us all." The journey to the edge of the quarantine zone took 5 days. 5 days during which Celine studied everything known about humans, which was distressingly little. Most records had been sealed or purged during the unification, when the Confederation had decided that some knowledge was best forgotten. What remained painted a confusing picture. Humans were physically unimpressive. No natural weapons, modest strength, unremarkable sensory capabilities. Yet they had survived on a planet that should have culled them, rising to dominate a biosphere filled with far more physically imposing creatures. Their history was a tapestry of contradictions, periods of terrible violence interwoven with incredible acts of compassion, societies based on domination existing alongside those founded on cooperation. They created art of breathtaking beauty and weapons of horrifying devastation, often within the same generation. As her ship, the Emissary, approached the boundary marker of the quarantine zone, Celine felt a flutter of anxiety. The last official contact with humans had been 712 standard years ago. What had they become in their isolation? "Ambassador," her pilot called out. "We're receiving a transmission." Celine froze. The humans shouldn't have detected them yet. The Emissary was equipped with the Confederation's most advanced stealth technology. "Put it through," she said, composing herself. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Confederation vessel, you are approaching restricted space. Identify yourself and state your purpose." Celine exchanged a startled look with her crew. "This is Ambassador Celine Vaxter of the Galactic Confederation. We come seeking audience with the human leadership on a matter of grave importance." A pause. "Then, transmit your identification codes and await further instructions." After they complied, silence reigned for several minutes. Then new coordinates appeared on their navigation system. "Proceed to the provided location." The voice instructed. "Any deviation will be considered hostile action." The coordinates led them deeper into the system, past the boundaries that had stood for centuries. As they approached, sensors detected multiple objects moving to intercept. Ships, far more advanced than anything the Confederation had expected. "By the ancestors," whispered the pilot. "How did they develop such technology in isolation?" Celine had no answer. The quarantine was supposed to have limited human technological growth, containing their potential threat. Clearly, that assumption had been catastrophically wrong. The Emissary was escorted to a massive space station, orbiting what their records identified as Mars, the 4th planet in the system. As they docked, Celine couldn't help but marvel at the structure. It wasn't just advanced. It was beautiful, blending function with aesthetic grace in a way that seemed distinctly human. When the airlock opened, Celine found herself face to face with humanity for the first time. They were tall, standing upright on 2 legs, with only 2 arms and 2 eyes, so different from her own 4-limbed, 4-eyed physiology. Their skin tones varied widely, as did their heights and builds, showing a diversity that most Confederation species lacked. One stepped forward, dressed in a simple but elegant uniform of deep blue. "Ambassador Vaxter," she said, "I am Admiral Helena Chen, representing the United Earth Alliance. Welcome to Nexus Station." Celine performed the traditional greeting of her people, all four hands open to show trust. "Thank you for receiving us, Admiral. I come bearing grave news and an even graver request." The human's face remained impassive. "We've been monitoring the Void Horde's advance for some time. We've been expecting you, though perhaps not quite so soon." Celine couldn't hide her shock. "You know about the Void Horde?" Admiral Chen's expression hardened slightly. "Did you think the quarantine actually confined us? We've been exploring the galaxy for over 500 years, Ambassador. We simply chose to do so, discreetly." The revelation stunned Celine. The humans had bypassed the quarantine, not just recently, but centuries ago. And the Confederation, for all its vaunted technology, had never detected them. "Then you know why I'm here," Celine said. "You're here because you're losing," Admiral Chen replied bluntly. "And now you want our help." Celine swallowed her pride. "Yes." The Admiral studied her for a long moment. "Come with me, Ambassador. There's something you need to see before we continue this discussion." As they walked through the station, Celine observed the humans around them. They moved with purpose, their expressions serious but not fearful. These were not a people terrified by the threat looming over the galaxy. These were people preparing. Admiral Chen led her to a vast observation deck overlooking what appeared to be a shipyard. But what Celine saw there defied all expectations. Ships, hundreds of them. Warships, their designs unlike anything in the Confederation fleet. Sleeker, more organic in their lines, yet radiating lethal purpose. "The Armada," Admiral Chen said simply. 500 vessels, each capable of facing a Void Horde vanguard. "How?" Celine whispered. "How did you build all this without our knowledge?" "The same way we've done everything since your Confederation abandoned us to our primitive ways," Chen replied. "Through tenacity, ingenuity, and the understanding that in the vastness of space, survival requires strength." Celine turned to face the Admiral, her four eyes meeting the humans too. "Will you help us?" "That," said Admiral Chen, "is a question for someone with more authority than me." She gestured toward a door at the far end of the observation deck. "The President is waiting." As Celine followed, she realized that everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. They weren't the savages of Confederation legend, nor were they the victims of a justified quarantine. They were something else entirely, something that had grown and evolved in ways the Confederation had never imagined. And now, they might be the galaxy's last hope. Unleashing humanity. President Ileana Reyes had eyes that had seen more than any human should. At 173 years old, she had witnessed humanity's greatest triumphs in their isolation and carried the burden of decisions that shaped their silent expansion. Now she sat across from Ambassador Celine, considering the plea that had been formally presented. "So," President Reyes said, her voice surprisingly gentle for someone who commanded such power, "the Confederation seeks our aid after 7 centuries of pretending we don't exist." It wasn't a question, but Celine answered anyway. "Yes, the Void Horde cannot be reasoned with, cannot be deterred. Our technology, advanced as it is, has proven ineffective. We need different thinking." "Human thinking," Rice clarified. "The very quality that led your people to quarantine us in the first place." Celine lowered all 4 of her eyes, a gesture of deep humility in her culture. "I cannot defend the decisions of the past. I can only appeal to your humanity in the present." President Reyes smiled, a small, enigmatic expression. "An interesting choice of words, Ambassador. Humanity was once used by your linguists as a term for barbarism, for unpredictability. Now you invoke it as a virtue." She stood, walking to a window that overlooked Earth, blue and green and alive, a jewel in the darkness. "We've been watching the Void Horde for decades. When we first detected them at the edge of the galaxy, we recognized the threat they represented. We've been preparing ever since." "Then you'll help us?" Celine asked, hope rising in her chest. "The better question," Rice countered, is whether your Confederation is prepared for what that help entails. Before Celine could respond, Admiral Chen entered the room. Madam President, we've received confirmation. The Void Horde has breached the Sirius defensive line. Estimated arrival at the core worlds in 35 days. President Reyes nodded, as if this merely confirmed what she already knew. She turned back to Celine. Tell me, Ambassador, what does your Confederation know of war? Not conflict, not skirmishes, but true war. Celine hesitated. We have historical records, military simulations, our peacekeeping forces. No, Reyes interrupted gently. You don't understand war. Your Confederation has known peace for so long that you've forgotten what it means to truly fight, with everything you have, everything you are. She gestured to Admiral Chen, who activated a holographic display. It showed tactical simulations, battle plans that made Celine's inner eyelids flutter in disbelief. These are our initial strategies against the Void Horde, Chen explained. Based on our observations, they operate as a collective consciousness with distributed processing, like a neural network spanning their entire mass. Which means, President Reyes continued, they can adapt rapidly, but only along predictable algorithmic paths. They lack true creativity, true innovation. Our plan, Admiral Chen said, is not to outthink them, but to overwhelm them with chaos. To present so many different threats, so many unpredictable variables, that their collective consciousness fragments trying to process it all. Celine stared at the plans, understanding dawning. You're not planning a defensive war. No, President Reyes confirmed. We're planning an offensive one. We will take the fight to them in ways they cannot anticipate. The Confederation would never approve such tactics, Celine said reflexively. Then the Confederation will die, Reyes stated flatly. This is not a negotiation, Ambassador. This is us telling you how we will save your people, whether they like our methods or not. The stark truth of those words silenced Celine. After a moment, she nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Full access to your star charts, fleet positions, and communication networks, Chen replied immediately. And no interference when we deploy our forces. And after? Celine asked. If we survive, what then? President Reyes returned to her seat, fixing Celine with a penetrating gaze. That depends on whether your Confederation can finally accept us as we are, not as you wish us to be. 20 days later, Celine stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as the human fleet prepared for their first engagement with the Void Horde. The Confederation Council had reluctantly approved the alliance, though many still harbor